Although it wasn't the success Kaneko had hoped for, AERO BUSTER, Trouble Specialty Raid Unit, released in 1990 in arcades, still made its mark among shoot-'em-up fans. This probably justified its port to the PC Engine the same year, and later to the Mega Drive in 1991. Renamed AERO Blasters in Japan due to potential confusion with HAL Laboratories' Air Fortress, which had previously registered the AERO BUSTER trademark, the game retained its original title in the Genesis version distributed internationally. The game's story is set in 2030 when Earth is suddenly attacked by the Mega Loadmasters. Anticipating this event, Charles K. Takeda had developed a futuristic weapon called the BUSTER system, capable of deconstructing matter by amplifying human brain waves. This system was integrated into two fighter jets, BUSTER 1 and BUSTER 2, piloted by his children. AERO Blasters still suffers from the image of being a secondary, generic, and soulless game, but it's not unreasonable to think that this image is unfair. The player is greeted by a simple screen, with options to set the number of lives, difficulty, credits, and access a sound test. Notably, the MD version features a unique characteristic, the ability to hide the HUD, which includes the score and lives. AERO Blasters features very classic scenery themes, with the usual urban environments, caves, and space stations. This isn't a flaw in my eyes, especially since the game sufficiently renews its environments to add variety. However, the graphics are uneven, alternating between high detail, as in the first or second stage, and sometimes a great emptiness, particularly in stages 3 and 4. More depth and, let's say, parallax would have been appreciated, as the backgrounds are often flat. Nonetheless, the pixel art retains an old-school charm, especially in the design of the enemies and bosses, who, another good point, generally take several forms. Despite the multitude of enemies that sometimes crowd the screen, the game suffers from no slowdown, even with 2 players, which is quite remarkable. Fluidity and speed are there throughout your missions, like in this memorable sequence where the scrolling suddenly accelerates in a tunnel. Finally, let's salute the little effort made to details, such as how these protection barriers rub against the walls, or how enemies or your ship crash. This attention to detail is also applied in the staging, like the city's destruction, the ascent into space, or the arrival of a boss. Note that a still image is displayed for a few seconds to allow the game to decompress data in the ROM. The music has character, with a sound typical of the 80s, even if the melodies often appear ordinary. However, some themes stand out, like the music from stages 2, 3, and 5. On the other hand, the sound effects of the shots and impacts seem too soft to me, which indirectly weighs on the gaming pleasure. Strangely, these change depending on the enemies and bosses. AERO Blaster uses a classic gameplay system based on power-ups to improve your equipment, including a forward shot and 6 options, such as a module, multi-directional shots, or missiles. A notable feature is that items are released by cargo ships that, once eliminated, leave only a short time to catch them. This mechanic sometimes causes mistakes and, more seriously, deaths due to confusion in the action. The difficulty becomes noticeable from stage 3, either because of the multitude of enemy shots or because of delicate movements, especially against obstacles in your path. Death, which occurs in a single hit, leaves you completely defenseless, leading to chains of deaths in certain sequences. The difficulty is further exacerbated by the atypical hitbox of the ship, narrow in width but surprisingly large in height, increasing estimation errors. However, let's commend the Buster Flash system, a sort of charge that eliminates projectiles or small enemies, which is handy when the screen is cluttered. Throughout the 6 levels, the player gradually progresses through the scales of difficulty until reaching a critical point in stage 6, which requires finesse and concentration. True, the game is quite short, about 30 minutes straight through, but finishing it on normal difficulty will take some time, especially since the entry barrier is not thin. But don't give up, as the game eventually reveals its full potential. Plus, Kaneko checks all the right boxes in the genre by offering, in addition to the solo mode, a 2-player cooperative mode. The game knows how to renew itself in level construction. Apart from the famous tunnel sequence, which adds dynamism and fun, AERO Blaster offers other little originalities, like 2 levels where your ship experiences 0 gravity, pulling it to the edge of the screen, or a sequence where walls rise in front of you. So, there is variety within the stages themselves, although one could criticize some soft belly passages. The bosses are not the most difficult part of the title and are mostly not very resistant. I found that their difficulty wasn't particularly increasing. For example, the first one isn't really easier than the following ones. However, it is appreciable that their patterns evolve and take several forms, generally 2, which ensures not only the spectacle but also an interesting challenge. At first glance austere, due both to its classic realization and its demanding mechanics, AERO Blaster may discourage many players. It's a shame because with a little perseverance, you overcome this initial phase of frustration to discover a shoot-'em-up that's more interesting than it seems, thanks to careful level design, certain dynamism in the action, and a rather well-balanced challenge. Kaneko's title is emblematic of the shoot-'em-ups of the early 90s, bridging 2 generations. At its release, it was not quite old school, but it was not completely modern either.